Welcome back to session 5. So far, we've talked about our challenge as wives to look to God for everything we need, and that this daily continual challenge involves a continual yes to Christ and hunger for Christ. We've examined our hearts, looking at areas of sin in which we need to give to God so that we can truly purify our hearts and align them with Christ. And in our last session, we recognized that we cannot be filled and overflowing with the Holy Spirit and hold on to control ourselves. That we must hand over and give God full access to our hearts and lives. We must pour out everything to God so that He can fully pour in to us His Spirit and His presence. So then today, we get to discover what happens in our hearts and in our marriages as we fully surrender to the King of Kings and ask the Holy Spirit to guide and control us. My husband farms near the Red River Valley, a very flat region where the land is such that after the rain, anytime, the water pools over the land. Because the soil is so dense and hard underneath the topsoil, the water isn't able to drain out on top, and it just sits around at the top of the seed. This is not good, especially once we've planted the crop in the ground, because the seed actually gets too much water and runs the risk of mold before it even gets a chance to bloom. Without the water draining out, little to nothing will grow. So some really smart people invented what's called a tiling system, a drainage system that removes excess unwanted water from the soil below the surface, providing optimal crop growth. The amazing thing is that farmers can control the system. They can turn it on or turn it off depending on what is needed. Typically, the best growth happens when it has rained, when our guys have turned on the tiling system, the water is draining out underground, and the sun is shining. It's hot. Each piece works together in this cyclical fashion. I'd love for us to think of you and me as the seed. God is the sun, and the Holy Spirit is the rain. As we sit covered, surrounded by the Holy Spirit, the overflowing water, feeling the sunlight, God, wanting to grow us into full bloom, something happens. Growth wants to take place. The seed wants to expand and grow, yet the excess water, the abundance of the Spirit, must be released and poured out. Our own inner tiling system turns on, and the water begins to overflow into the surrounding areas, God's people. And the result is optimal conditions for growth. Fruit grows. This is the place God desires for us, in this state of receiving from Him His word, His light every day, for us to be firmly planted, surrounded with and controlled by the Holy Spirit, and for us to then live filled, pouring out the presence of God to everyone around us and in our marriages. What begins to grow is this plentiful crop. The fruits of the Spirit grow in our hearts. The fruit of the Holy Spirit is a biblical term that describes 9 attributes of a person living in harmony with the Holy Spirit. So what are these fruits? Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23 reads, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." So we're going to break these fruits down in 3s and spend the next few sessions talking about them. I'll just give a brief overview of how they look in our lives as wives. We'll go over each, and then you'll have an opportunity to discuss them in your group some more. But remember, as you read these words, these are not our natural responses or tendencies. If they were, we wouldn't need any help to live them out. These are the fruits that grow by living with and being controlled by the presence of God within us, the Holy Spirit. So the first fruit is love. The Greek word for love is agape. Agape love denotes an undefeatable kindness, friendliness, and helpfulness that always seeks the highest in others no matter their behavior. It is a love that gives freely without asking anything in return and does not consider the worth of its object. It is more a love by choice, and it refers to the will rather than the emotion. So, is the fruit of love in bloom in your heart? What would your husband say? How do you dream the fruit of love to grow in your heart and marriage? How would others know you are living by the Holy Spirit because of the way that you love? The second fruit of the Spirit is joy. The Greek word for joy is chara. And by the way, I won't pronounce these correctly, so forgive me. But chara. This fruit of joy is deeper than mere happiness. It's rooted in God and comes from Him. Since it comes from God, it is serene and stable, and more serene and stable than any worldly happiness, which is merely emotional and lasts for a short period of time. So is the fruit of joy in bloom in your heart? What would your husband say? How do you dream the fruit of joy to grow in your heart and in your marriage? How would others know you are living by the Holy Spirit because of the joy you exude? The third fruit of the Spirit is peace. The Greek word for peace is eirene. The Greek equivalent for the Hebrew word shalom, which expresses the idea of wholeness, completeness, or tranquility in the soul that is unaffected by the outward circumstances or pressures. The word eirene strongly suggests the rule of order in a place of chaos. This inward tranquility is so appealing and attractive. It's not void of fear, but lives continually handing fear over and living in a state of trust instead. So is peace evident in your life? What would your husband say? And how would others know you are living by the Holy Spirit because of the way that you exude peace? Enjoy your discussion.